What's happening, everybody? It's your boy Jimmy James 59, and the time has come for my 2025 1v1 mid-elo Arabia tier list. Yes, I've been doing one of these almost every year, I think, and the time right now is ripe. We just had a major patch come out a few weeks ago, and so there's been some time to digest some big changes in the game, and this is also right before the Three Kingdoms DLC that's going to add 5 new civs, and I'm not going to wait for that DLC to come out to talk about those civs right now, or maybe in like a week or so, because it's going to take months, I think, to sort out those civilizations and get them balanced. So it's kind of pointless to talk about them in a tier list. So here we are, right? I think we'll be in a good position to really kind of understand where the game is at right now at the mid-elo level. And so I'll just say 2 things before I start ranking civs. The first is that when I say mid-elo, I'm talking about a pretty wide berth here. I'd say anywhere from like 1900 all the way down to maybe 1100 players that have a lot of games played. So there's a bit of diversity, but as you go through that sort of the meat of the bell curve there, what you'll find is that players, as you get better, tend to have, better macro in terms of economics, in terms of strategy. They tend to react faster. They tend to play a bit more deliberately. They react a bit quicker. I think I might have mentioned that. And that mid-elo play, I think, is defined, really, to me at least, as players who, again, with some variance as you move through, right, are able to do all of those things, right? There's a lot of variety in mid-elo. Some players are maybe terrible at macro, but they've got, great unit micro or something like that. That's fine. I mean, again, you're going to have variation, but I think that these are players, right? And, I'm kind of right smack dab in the middle of that kind of 1500. We're players that we do a lot of things right, but there are also some critical things maybe that we still do wrong. And, we might not be dodging ballistics just yet. Or if we do, our economy goes idle for, like 3 minutes while it happens, that kind of thing. And so there's still just some ingredients, that still need to be refined. And the second thing I'd say is that, just in terms of the tiers themselves, S-tier civs are really dominant. They're the kind of civs that if you let them play the game the way that they want to play the game, are going to be really hard to stop. And D-tier civs are those that have a lot of limitations. You find with those civs, it's a lot harder to play the game. You have to try a bit more. You have to force more things. And when it comes to that B tier, that kind of intermediate zone, there's a few different kind of civs, I think, that live there. Some are going to be civs that they're a bit more, they might be multiple in terms of being able to field different kinds of unit comps, but they're not all that strong, the comps they have. They might be civs that have one solid fastball, kind of a knockout punch, but the opponent knows it's coming, and so for that reason, you have to really think about how you're going to get there and how you're going to keep your opponent from stopping it. Things like that. So, just, remember, right, there's no F tier here. I don't think any civilization is like unplayable on Arabia. It's really just, the really strong civs and then some civs with quite a few limitations. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into things. And we're going to start off with the Armenians. I think this is a classic B tier. Armenians have a really strong late game punch in champions, right? 100 HP champions. And a lot of the strategy on Arabia feels like you're really trying to get to that. You have a nice economy once you get into feudal age with some eco bonuses that do a little bit more for you. But in the mid game, you can feel a little weak, right? You have crossbows, no thumb ring, knights that don't scale all that well, so you got to be careful how much you invest. You have a good unique unit at the castle, but again, you got to get a castle up for it. So massing units like that up on Arabia is kind of tough, and it's a unit, the composite bowman, that has some pretty limited range, so it's kind of soft countered by other archers. So based on that, right, this is a knockout punch kind of civ, right? You got that one blow kind of chambered in there, and after that it feels a bit mediocre. So again, B tier civ, if you let Armenians get to that point in the late game, you're going to struggle, but there's things you can do to stop them from getting there. Aztecs, to me, I like them in the A tier. A lot to like. I think that they've really benefited from this patch. A lot of people focus on the Jaguar Warriors. I focus on the fact that your Eagle Scouts create faster in Feudal Age. You're already creating military units fast with the Aztecs, and this is a civ. They get to that Eagle Scout Archer unit composition, and man, it's efficient and it's tough to stop. You start off with a little extra gold, good economy behind it. I mean, Aztecs are a really nice civ. Good Eagle Warriors in the mid game. They have multiple late game compositions, either with Eagle Warriors or Jaguar Warriors. Decent Arbalist, Atlatl Skirms. I mean, there's a lot you can do. The relic bonus is really nice. One thing mid-elo players are doing today that I think that they really weren't years ago is relic contestation is much more common. And Aztec players definitely going to go for it. A lot of monks these days. Used to not see as many monks in mid-elo games. You see a lot more now being used actually quite offensively. I keep them out of the S tier because Aztecs, well, I think on a map like Arabia, lacking that really spammable mobile unit like cavalry, just lacking entirely, I think is enough of a limitation to me in the late game, where maybe not S tier. It's a situation that you could find yourself really struggling in at that moment, but it's very close, almost S tier, but let's just call them right now top of A tier for the moment. Going next to the Bengalis, and Bengali is a great example of a civ that I just think has too many limitations to get out of the D tier. You lack knights, that's a problem. Your crossbows, don't have thumbring, that's a problem. Nice economy if you want to boom with this civ, it's great. Wrath has got nerfed recently. The whole Phosphor rush of fast castle unique unit has become a little bit harder. So yeah, I think with the Bengalis, this is a civ. It feels like the things that you want to go for, your elephant archers, battle elephants, Rotha. It's just you have to try a lot harder to get there. And to me, that is a classic example of a D tier civ. Let them get to the late game, and I think it can be a problem. I think even Arbalest Light Cav with this civ is pretty underrated because your Light Cav do extra attack versus skirmishers, which are going to be there to counter your archers. But again, it's a comp that has to try a little bit harder than I think it should. And that's true for the civ overall. Coming up next, we have the Berbers. I think in the past I would have put them in the A tier, but I think that lacking that Dark Feudal Age eco bonus, or at least a decent one, is enough that in today's mid-elo gameplay holds it back for me. Other players, the game has gotten so much faster, I think, that getting those faster uptimes, it's kind of filtered down from the higher level, and we're seeing some of the impacts on that where sometimes somebody just gets ahead and they make it really, really hard for you. And I also think that in this new meta opening where Men-at-Arms are back on the menu and Men-at-Arms skirmisher play is very strong, I think that the Scout Rush is kind of the loser in all that. And so, when you're Berbers, what you were really hoping to do with this civ is to play something like Scouts in the Night, so you could take advantage of your Night discount, your stable discount in general in the Castle Age. And nowadays on Arabia, and I might do a video about this, but it feels like even in Feudal Age, you have to sort of play a combined arms approach where it's hard to make just one unit type anymore, even in Feudal Age. Typically, it seems like you have to make, at least 2 units, maybe even 3 different types of units, depending on how heavy the fighting is. So, well, that being said, Berbers, I think they're a good example. One of those civs, a number of options. You can play crossbow with them. Camel archers, camels, knights, hand cannoneers late. You have bombard cannon, which is really good for playing defense against siege and sniping enemy trebuchets. But it's just kind of hard to get there, right? It doesn't feel like maybe you have the strongest options. And so for that reason, right, B tier is a good spot for them. Bohemians, I think, are one of the hardest civs for me to judge in the game right now. I think in today's meta, with a Scout Rush that feels, probably like the lesser of openings, Bohemians feel like a B tier civ to me. Chemistry on their crossbows can feel very strong in the mid game. The Hoofnisa, if you can get to it, great late game option. And the thing about Bohemian spearline units is that they really make that trying to make a cavalry transition later. You really got to think a lot more carefully about it when you have spear units that do as much damage as these guys. And so put all that together, I still see a civilization that can get out mobilized by some civs, maybe particularly in late game. You kind of spread them out, but this is a civ that kind of wants to play that way anyways. So it always feels like a clash of styles, and it kind of comes down to who pulls it off and executes the best. And if you're asking a question like that, to me, that's a good sign that you're dealing with a B tier civ. Next, we have the Britons, and I think the Britons to me are another B tier civ. Strong foot archers, you know what Briton players want to do. The problem is they don't really have anything else as far as a counterpunch goes. If you get into late game, like cavalry, at least to get the last armor upgrade, but Miss Bloodlines are good. I do think that in today's meta now, you can think about going men-at-arms into archers, and the faster ranges help you. I think in general, Britons are probably a beneficiary of the new patch because we're seeing a lot more infantry play. And so I think because of that, we're also seeing a lot more archer play. And that's the Briton game plan. And so, there were times, not that long ago when the scout rush, I think, was maybe a little bit more dominant, I'd open scouts with Britons and it wouldn't be a thing. So, probably try to play scouts and archers, that kind of thing. But nowadays, Britons, I think, is a good B tier. Okay, so now we are moving on to the Bulgarians. Major beneficiary of this patch. I still think they're a B tier civ. I'm not going to rank the civs in the tier list here. You can sort of sort out for yourselves who you like. Bulgarians have some limitations. Not a good economy, and the fact that you missed the crossbow line in a meta where we're seeing more and more archer play, I think is kind of a big deal, because you don't want to invest in a lot of archers in the early game. Now you can invest in the skirmishers, or you can play decent cav archers as the game goes on. But I think those are enough strategic limitations to where it's a lot more about the fact that the opponent kind of knows what's coming. And so given that, right, opponents can more easily plan around you strategically. And for that reason, right, B tier seems pretty solid for the civ. Burgundians to me are an easy D tier civ. To really work well with the civ, you got to take advantage of their cheaper and earlier eco bonuses. That usually causes you to lose initiative, and so it just feels like militarily you're kind of playing from behind. Now, I will say with Burgundians, I think it's a little misleading in that you can still do a pretty decent archer build with this civ. It's just not playing into your strengths as well. And so if you're up against, say, strong archer civs, which again, we're seeing a lot of those these days really come to the fore, I just think with the Burgundians, you feel like you're not playing your game. I think in the mid game, if I can get to something like Crossbow Cavalier, if in the late game I can get to like Paladin or a Costelier plus hand cannons, that's the game you want to play. It is worth keeping in mind this is a civilization with terrific eco, so if you can play defensive, stay safe, do that kind of thing, and get to that late game, which is the same thing we basically said about their other D tier civ in the Bengalis, then you might find actually that you're set up pretty well. But getting there can be pretty hard. Burmese to me are, I think they're a nice C tier civ, in that, your archer options really aren't great. And so when your opponent goes archers to counter, say, a men-at-arms rush, it can feel kind of icky if you're trying to play into archers, because even in the castle age, you're going to struggle a bit. But now you do have a pretty good economy, you can play mobile units, and you do have those nice infantry units. So this is a civ that has some things going for it. But I think that missing that archer armor upgrade, and I think that the cheaper wood bonus, I see as more of like a power spike, and that you get to the next age, you got that economy now, and you don't have to pay for it. So that's what you're benefiting from. To me, I don't really see it as an enduring economic bonus as much. So limitations, but again, decent knights. If you can get to the infantry, it's good. But I don't think you really have the economy that's helping you as much with that. So take it for what it's worth. Byzantines to me are a civ that I think in a previous patch I would have said A, but I view them more as a B tier civ now. No Dark Age eco bonus is something that I think is really complicating for this civ. You know, generic archer openings, not as good, though. I do think that one of the compositions we're going to see a lot more these days is the archer skirmisher mix. If you mix in enough archers, I feel like you can deal pretty decently with scouts in feudal age if they emerge. And I don't think players are making as many scouts now, so you probably don't need as many archers to thin them out. And then if you mix skirms in, then you can kind of keep your archers alive, right? And so, and I think that, you know, having cheaper skirmishers benefits the Byzantines in this way. And outside of that, Byzantines are a civ that, you know, gives you a number of options, but it always feels like you kind of have the cruiserweight version of them. You know, not a lot of power with this civ. Some durability late with getting the last armor upgrades and cavalry, that kind of thing is fine. But this is a civ that really relies on its versatility more than anything. The Celts are a really groovy civ here. A or B, man, I think I gotta put them into A tier. Your man-at-arm opening now is so strong. You know, you're faster than archers now. That actually, I think, means a lot. And you have the nice wood bonus to get skirmishers out in the field. With Celts, you're always having to deal with a mid-game. That's a little trickier to play. But again, if you're going infantry and your opponent's going archers, then getting to say, like, you know, if you have skirmishers on the field, it's great. That faster firing siege, I think, can be really good against archer civs. Maybe at higher levels, I think players could probably out micro Celt onagers a bit easier. I think in the mid-elo, even though onager micros got better, I think in the mid-elo though, players make a few more mistakes. And so I think we can afford them to kind of keep Celts in that higher tier. And the Celt late game is pretty darn good. Woad Raiders, I think, are extremely strong. They're quick. You know, your infantry, I think is overall getting quicker, I want to say, in the game. So, yeah, Celts, I think, have been a real beneficiary. They do have limitations, right? And that, to me, is what keeps them out of S tier. You know, you have the crossbow knight being so weak, I think, in the mid game and beyond, to me, is what kind of keeps them out of the S tier. But beyond that, you have a lot of great things going for you. The Chinese are pretty big losers in this patch, I think. But I do think at the end of the day, this is still a B tier civ. This is a civ that's gone all over the place in tier list. I think initially I kind of had them as an A tier civ because their start was too funky. Then the start got easier because players are getting better. There's more guides out there. I think I put them S tier maybe, or at least I thought of them as an S tier civ. Nowadays though, the fact that you miss camels now, I think for your mid game really kind of jacks things up for you. Not being able to play camel crossbow, I think, is a major limitation that this civ used to enjoy. The fact that now you have chickens that are available on Arabia that have to be milled, not being able to constantly push deer, I think, is a major weakness for Chinese. I think it makes you very vulnerable to getting lamed, and that's definitely something I've noticed that's happened. Anytime I'm on Chicken Arabia, I figure that out. I'm always starting to look for my boars. Lamers are, they are out in force on maps like that. If they can't push deer, like, hey, what's your scout gonna do? Like, people are gonna go forward and lame. Chinese can really suffer from that. And I think too, the men-at-arms rush is something that Chinese have never really done a great job of. And so now that other players can do it, put that pressure on. I just think there's a lot of things working against the favor of the Chinese these days. Still a good civ, still got a lot of unit comps you can get to cheaply, pretty high quality, kind of unlike the Byzantines where you miss things like Bloodlines and Blast Furnace. Chinese get those, but they don't have the versatility that they used to, other than they miss camels. Fire Lancers, I think, can be a good support unit. I think this is the first civ to talk about Fire Lancers for. The thing that's really cool about Fire Lancers in terms of supporting your archers, which Chinese tend to want to play, is they're not in the Spearman armor class, and so they just don't take the damage from those skirmishers that other units like pikemen, right, that you would use to defend your archers take. So that's a major advantage. Humans, God, another civ that's really hard to figure out. I tend to view humans more as a C tier civ these days. I think that the 2TC Arabia plays kind of been figured out, but the thing about humans though, with the cheaper ranges and cheaper stables in feudal age, I think I would have put them B tier in a previous patch. but I don't think that the stable, again, I'm just really, you'll hear from, me in this video. I'm really down on the scout opening these days. I think probably pro level, they're good enough to figure it out, but it just wouldn't surprise me if I were to take a look at something like AoE stats, and at the 1200 and above level, I think it's probably going to be a lot more archer civs in the top 10 than it used to be. And so for that reason, I just think that it doesn't suit Cumin's gameplay as well. And, they might go double range, but you just go one range skirmishers, and I think it'll be fine. So, and then, yeah, so I see this as a civ that maybe struggles a little bit early. It's a little harder to work in the sort of siege workshop, feudal age stuff with Cumins. Can be done. If you can surprise an opponent with it, it's good. But again, just maybe a little too limited. Dravidians, I think, are a major beneficiary. I'm going to put them in the B tier. The wood bonus here is great for getting archers out or maybe going 2 ranges yourself. This is a meta that sees a lot of skirmisher play, cheaper infantry upgrades, fits. Getting husbandry at the stable now for your elephant archers, I think is massive. That's massive for your light cavalry in the late game. There's a lot to like with Dravidians. What keeps them out of the A tier and above for me is you lack the knight line entirely, and you just don't have a strong mobile unit. Even if you get Woot Steel for your light cavalry, it's a glass cannon. And knight play was so dominant at mid-elo levels for a while. I think a lot of players still rely on it. Like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if the Dravidians had taken a big jump in the rankings, but I still think in the mid-game, being able to play knights and having mobile units, right, and making that transition, I think mid-elo players are still going to do that, right? The archer prevalence, I think, has a lot more to do with the openings. It's not necessarily indicative of how the game plays out. At mid-elo gameplay, there's a lot of back and forth between units, so the game is sophisticated these days. So for that reason, I think Dravidians, they got some things going, B tier civ, but I wouldn't give them. I think there's enough limitations to where I wouldn't try and give them too much more. Ethiopians are a civ to me. Oh man, A or an S tier. I'm gonna put them in the A tier. Great archer opening. Archers are great throughout. Shelter warriors can be strong. Don't sleep on royal heirs camels, especially if somebody's playing cav archers against you. Cav archer meta, I think, at the mid-elo level, I think kind of came and went. I still like playing cav archers myself personally, but it can definitely be countered now that we have scorpions with ballistics, which is insane, and Ethiopians are going to have good ones with those 2 in the late game. To me, what keeps them from being S tiers, I don't think you have the best economy in terms of, you have a power spike economy, not an enduring one. So if you're under pressure with this civ, you can kind of fall behind, I think. And you still don't have the best infantry later in the game too. This does feel like a civilization to where, it can feel a bit vulnerable. That archer skirmisher combination I was mentioning earlier, I think Ethiopians can be a little bit vulnerable to that, and that players can kind of use that to sort of keep the Ethiopian archers from, getting a little bit too, let them get a little too buck wild. Franks, oh, the Franks, gosh, how the mighty, I think, have really fallen. Let me think about this. Okay, let me say this. I think at higher levels, this is probably a higher ranked civ, because I think higher level players probably have a better idea. They can probably use the Frank economy a lot better and still play things like archers, things like that, more sufficiently. I think at the mid-elo level, players still probably just want to play scouts. That's where your bread and butter is. And the bonuses now just aren't set up to do it. Something I will say about mid-elo gameplay today is that I do think what works for the Franks is the fact that mid-elo players are better about spreading out across the map, getting relics, and having more gold in the late game, and I think that facilitates more paladin play. I don't have data on it, but just in my experience, I tend to see civilizations go for paladin more of the time than I used to. And so for that reason, right, I think that you still have some good comps late game. You do have Throwing Axemen and Lykev as a composition. I don't think it's like a good heavyweight comp, but it maybe is a little bit cheaper of a comp. You can go for it. The Georgians, Georgians are really, really strong these days. Not as much of a not as much of an infantry civ though. What do I think? it's really close to being S tier. And I think, you know what? Let me think about this. This is going to be controversial. I think for mid-elo players, this is an A tier civ. I think that higher level, this is probably S tier. I think it's A tier because you typically want to open scouts, kind of like Frank's. That's a bit more disincentivized these days. You can open archers with Georgians, and it's fine, but it's not playing to your strengths. Again, kind of like the Franks. What makes the Georgians different is I think that you just have a fantastic mid-game economy. I think that your cav archers are good enough to where you can play that cav archer meta pretty darn well with Georgians in the mid-game and beyond. You have a unique unit that it's just, I think, is still maybe a little OP, too cheap. It's a combination of cheapness, ease of massing it, and raw damage. Say it that way. So, and having the fortified church is big because it's a nice defensive structure and it only costs wood. That's nothing to sleep on. So, but again, I think that the meta doesn't quite suit Georgians today, and that is kind of an issue for the civ. Coming up next, we have the honestly, Goths. They're either B tier or A tier. Really cheap infantry. To me, Goths and Dravidians are kind of comparable in a lot of ways. But I think that with Goths, you actually have pretty decent cavalry when it comes to fighting melee. You miss the last armor, but you do get hussars. Like, Goth hussars are no joke and a great thing to pair with, like, hand cannons or, anytime you need a raiding unit, right? You do have something with Goths. I think they're a civ that are more versatile than Dravidians to me. The Huskarl is still a great unit. Better unit than like the Arumi swordsmen of the Dravidians, and I think you have you can with Goths on Chicken Arabia maybe feel like you're a little out of you're not getting the best bonuses, but still a great civ. Gurjaras, God, this is a tough one. I think Gurjaras are still a B tier civ though. Good economy. I think Gurjara players were already opening archers more often than not, just because players were so scared of Gurjaran Shravamsha riders and camels that you wind up opening archers a lot with the civ so that you can play something like crossbow camel, crossbow Shravamsha rider in the mid game anyways. I think that shotgun throwers are great. You have really cheap late game unit comps that are stronger than you'd think. Elephant archers don't get as much play with this civ, but I actually think they really should. Especially elephant archers are a little bit cheaper. So again, this civ I think is more multiple than people give it credit for, and for that reason, I actually like this civ still quite a bit, but the infantry meta really takes down your strategic flexibility in my view, where I think maybe before players didn't know if you'd open scouts or archers, and now it just feels like in a lot of instances you have to. Hindustanis to me are they an S tier civ? They're really close, but to me what keeps the Hindustanis out of the S tier is that you lack the nightline completely, and I just think that that's still too big of an issue. It's such a strategic hole where, again, opponents are going archers more these days. I think that plays well against Hindustanis. Yes, you have the Ghulam as a unique unit. Very true. And I like, that's one of my favorite unique units. But you can kind of figure out that it's coming. And if you play something like Crossbow Knight, it can be tough to deal with. Hindustanis can't play that comp. I like Hindustanis a bit more than Gurjaras as a similar civ because of the eco, and I do think having cavalry archers as an option and being able to play cav archer hussar, which is a very strong Arabia comp, that is That's something not a lot of civs can do, and Hindustanis can. So for me, that keeps them in the A tier. The Huns, to me, another B tier civ. Good eco. You know, the meta doesn't quite suit them, but you can still play archers pretty well. I mean, you can basically play archers for a while with this civ. And I think that crossbow knight is probably the strongest mid-game comp with the civ, and this is not a bad one to do it with. You can also still get to cav archers, so a lot of the things that you do with the Huns, you can still do it. It's just that I think that this is a civ that was better suited in a scout archer meta, and an infantry meta. You can wind up playing defensively a bit more with the Huns as men-at-arms get at your base, and yeah, that's not something you usually... If you're playing defensively with Huns, usually something's gone wrong. Next up, we have the Incas, and folks, this is going to be my first S tier civilization. I think Incas, personally, I think they need to be tuned a little bit down because cheaper eagles, skirmishers, men-at-arms, and your eagles create faster now. You have a nice wood and food bonus in Dark Age to kind of help you get your units out in the field. You know, in the mid-game, the fact that you can get slingers in Castle Age to counter infantry makes it really tough because you go cavalry, you deal with cheap pikemen, and then eventually the cameo is a unique unit later. So that's tricky. And then, you know, if you go like long swords, you do with slingers, which are very good. This is a civ that has everything. The only weakness with this civ is that you don't really have much of a gold bonus, and in the hyper late game, if it gets to that point where it's the hyper late game, I mean, you're going to deal with like big trash armies of cheap skirmishers and cheap halberdiers, which when I say it out loud doesn't, like, that still sounds pretty good to me actually, because your skirmishers, you can take the minimum range off them. You know, so this is a civ that has so many counters, and yeah, there's not a lot of windows where this civilization feels weak to me. Maybe at a higher level they wouldn't be ranked so high, but again, like I said, I haven't checked AoE stats since the you know, I don't know if I'd seen something about, you know, preliminary results on it, but you know, go check, see if the things I'm saying bear out. Would not be surprised if Incas are a top 10, top 5 civilization. Speaking of civs that benefited from the next patch, Italians I think are very good. Not quite S tier, I think they're A tier now. The archer bonus you get with basically free Pavisa and Feudal Age, very strong. Synergizes extremely well with your Dark Age food bonus. I mean, well, a food bonus you get every age because every age is cheaper, but it's a good Dark Age food bonus. Your play can still be countered by skirmishers, so it's not just make archers and forget. So, well, it's a very, very strong. I'm not sure it makes archers OP just because players are playing archers so much, but it really does limit what your opponent can do. It's hard to go scouts against Italians because of the extra melee armor. And it's hard to go archers against Italians because they're going to be stronger out of the gate. You know, I find that if I play archers with Italians, I almost always have a better opening than my opponent, or maybe I have more freedom to mess things up and still be in an okay position. But yeah, this is a great civ. You get to that mid game though, I think the effect starts to taper off. So I think versus Italians, it's all about just surviving, and you can play skirmishers. So again, it's really strong, this bonus. I wouldn't say it's OP just yet. Very strong. You know, I wouldn't mind if they tuned it down, perhaps even, but they might not have to, just because again, there's so much archer skirm play these days. Maybe the current meta just suits it. But with sort of different rules around the meta, I might be kind of worried about the Italian feudal age bonus. Japanese have been another big beneficiary. Man, this is tough. Look, I think I still gotta put them on B tier. I think this is a civ that, I think with the Cav Archer meta kind of fading a bit, at least from mid-elo gameplay, and the fact that your archers are generic, you can get off to a great start with Japanese, but I think if you're up against some of these more top tier, like, you know, Aztec, Celt, Italian players who can get up at a decent speed as you, you know, you could still kind of run into problems with your minimums, because the faster attack rate for infantry, if you're chasing units like you would be in feudal age, it's kind of wasted because there's not that much time between attacks because there's so much running away. So you're not really seeing the effects of it. So that's, I think that Japanese are really, really strong. Maybe top of B tier. The Samurai is still a good unit, getting a little bit of extra speed bump. I love that change to the Civ. But I still think that in the middle stages of the game, and then in the late game, they still feel a bit too much like a cruiserweight Civ. A lot of flexibility though, decent mid-game knights, mediocre cavalry late game. It's just, yeah, there's just some things missing. Missing bombard cannons, I think, is tricky too. Khmer, man, I think Khmer are a really, really good Civ. I think Khmer have to be S tier. Great economy. Not needing buildings to age up is just such a good bonus. You could play fast archers with this Civ, no problem. I saw a build order out there somewhere for like 15 pop archers. I mean, really, like, I wouldn't recommend doing that most games, but that's how fast it can happen. And so you can play fast archers with the Civ and get up with the best of them. Play decent cavalry late, but it's the Scorpions. Like, from the mid-game on, dealing with Khmer, Scorpions, and having a great food economy to be able to create a lot of cavalry that you can just suicide against onagers, that's hard, man. And ballista elephants, get them bad boys rolling. Khmer are tough. Khmer have better archers than you think. They even have really good cav archers. It's something you probably don't expect, but only missing Thumb Ring, which doesn't matter as much in the late game. And doesn't matter as much in the mid game when you're trying to hit and run a bit more too. So I think Khmer, to me, they're another S tier Civ. They've got it all, in my view. They can do a lot. Next up, we have Koreans. Koreans, I view these days a lot like Italians, actually. I think they're pretty similar. My understanding is they've been a pretty good beneficiary of this patch. I think Fire Lancers synergize extremely well because they're so cheap. Again, remember, Fire Lancer is not in Spearman armor class, so they're a great support unit for your archers if you're able to play a gold heavier comp. But if you can get that masked up, not bad at all. You know, Koreans with the archer openings, very strong. You can get out mobilized late, true. But you can also play really nice tower defense with Koreans too. I find that can be very helpful for you know, limiting opponent mobility. Speaking of a mobile opponent, talk about the Lithuanians. I'm not hear as much about this Civ these days, but I think Lithuanians are in the A tier now. You can do any opening you want with the free food that you get. You have faster skirmishers, so it's very tough now to then go archers against this Civ because they have skirmishers that will hunt you down. Don't sleep on Lithuanians in that way. You can play crossbows in the mid game if you want. You can play on cav archers. You've got knights. Your winged hussar late game, really slept on. If you want to raid with a good unit, the lightest hand cannons, bombard cannons. This Civ's got a lot going for it. And getting town centers down now and getting more food, you kind of have a better, it's not a great eco bonus, but it's one of those that it just gives you a little bit of that pop to where I think that Lithuanians are definitely an A tier Civ. Players are collecting relics a lot more at mid-elo, so I think we're seeing, Lithuanians in kind of a good spot here. Magyars, to me, it's between B and C's here, and I hate this because I think the Magyars are they're one of my fan favorite Civs. I love playing with the Magyars. There are times in this tier list I would have ranked them up here, but I gotta put them in the C tier now because I think they are, even though you can still play scouts with them, one of the few decent scout rushes left. I think the meta doesn't suit them, and lacking an eco bonus just makes it that much more difficult to say if you go scouts, your opponent is, playing men-at-arms and archers, you're just going to be that much slower to get that archery range up to start getting skirmishers on the field, and you don't have a bonus for your skirmishers either. and you wind up spending more time in that age. You get teched out faster when your opponent gets to castle age faster, and that's how it goes. I think that Scorpions have, like I said, I think they've kind of hurt the Cav Archer meta, which is where Magyars were specializing in. I mean, just before this patch, I might have said Magyars were A tier for mid-elo. I mean, really, though I think the Scorpion meta may have, affected even that. I might have put them back in the B tier actually. But no, I think that, look, they're a civ that has a number of options, but your economy is a major limitation, and I don't think the meta suits them all that well in today's game. But they do have good power spikes, good military unit tech tree, and a deadly late game with Cav Archers and the Magyar Hussar. Also, don't be afraid to play Arbalist if you need to. That's if you're up against really strong camel civs, maybe something like somebody wants to play camel crossbow against you, you can play archers that scale pretty well. Melee are really good these days, I think higher level players, probably S tier. Mid-elo, I'll put them A tier. I think the start is a little bit tricky. In 6 months, I could be saying Melee is S tier because people really have the start down. But getting the free armor on the infantry is fantastic for drushing. You do have some late game limitations on a map like Arabia with cavalry. Cheap elephants are good too, though. There's a lot to like about the civ. Bombard cannons are nice, but I think you can get out mobilized even in the mid game. In the mid game, this is a civ, for instance, that whereas a civ maybe like Lithuanians or even Huns can play like crossbow knight. You can't really play that with Melee because you don't even get the second armor upgrade on your cavalry, and that's a major limitation. For Burmese, it's kind of a minor limitation, missing that on the archers. For cavalry, trust me, it's a major limitation. So I think this can be a bit trickier civ to play at mid-elo levels, but still really good. I think it's enough for A tier, really. It's strong. Malians are, I'll tell you what, these A tier civs are really making a comeback to me. Men-at-Arms meta suits them. Men-at-Arms into archers, Cellstone, University, fast ballistics, very strong with this civ. Nice gold bonus, nice wood bonus. In the mid game, a lot of diversity. Knights, camels, crossbows. Don't scale perfectly, but scale okay. And, you can play longswords with the extra pierce armor. I mean, lots to like about the Malians. This is a good civ. Not a lot of holes in their gameplay. You don't always have the strongest option. You really need to get Farimba late game for their melee cavalry to pop. But again, you still have a lot of things going for you with this civ. Decent skirms, all that extra pierce armor, your infantry is so nice to have. So yeah, I'm very comfortable with them in the A tier. Mayans. See, Mayans are an example of a civ to me that I think at the mid-elo level are S tier, might be more A tier at higher levels, because I think that Archer Eagle comp is probably easier to stop at higher levels. And Mayans, I think, really rely on that. You have a great economy. I mean, this is a two-dimensional civ, but boy, they cover their own bases really well. Whereas the Aztecs, right, I said a lot of the same things about, and I dropped them down to the A tier for not having good late game cavalry. To me, with the Mayans, I think they make up for it in that you save so many resources on the archers. As an eco bonus, you gain so many extra resources. But not only that, you have mobile units in the plumed archer that can escape and survive. And El Dorado Eagles have so much survivability, you just don't lose the units all that much. Mayans are a limited civ. I'd almost put them in the A tier because I feel like they have some difficult matchups. But I think that at a mid-elo level, they're one of those civs. You let them play the game, they're just too far ahead of you. So you got to make it messy, and that's a problem. So that to me, it sounds like an S tier civ. Mongols to me, again, Revenge of the S tier civs. Too flexible. I think you can still get up fast with them. Some players will eventually adjust to Chicken Arabia with the Mongols. I think you're already kind of starting to see it. This is a great laming civ as well because the extra sight on the scouts. Great diversity in the mid game. Not a lot of eco bonus late, but you really make up for it. I mean, you just get so far ahead of your opponents here. That's the gameplay. Step Lancers are still really, really strong. Cav Archers are really strong. You can go Arbalist. You're very multiple. And then once you get to the, the late game, Mangudai, one of the best unique units around. Mongols are a great civ, and they cover up their early game, covers up a lot of weaknesses later. So I think for that reason I'll put them in the S tier. Persians. Persians are a civ I would have had in the S tier before, but I do think now in today's meta, they're not as infantry oriented. I think that's bad for Persians. You can find yourself playing more defensively with them than you would before. Still a good civ. You can still open up archers really well. Play archers in the mid game. A really hard civ to raid in the mid game. A lot of options late. And yeah, there's a lot to like about the Persians. If you need late game infantry for some reason, you really don't have it with this civ. So you got to beware. But, right, ton of options. Like I said, the only thing for me is that I think this is a civ that you typically want to be playing scouts and knights with. And that's harder now. So you got to play a little outside of your comfort zone. Next up, we have the Poles. Poles, easy D tier civ to me. This is a civ that if your full works are in the wrong spot, you're going to be under a lot of pressure early, and you're really pressured to get your farms up, and that's a lot of wood that you're not spending on archers and getting a range up and a blacksmith and all that. I think it's very hard to play with Poles in Arabia. Portuguese, S tier civ maybe? I think the cheap units are just so good with this civ. Honestly, I think it's like Portuguese. You have a Dark Age bonus that's giving you extra wood. You can go up a little faster, I think, now. Cheap archers are great, so you can have a really nice, strong start. It only gets better as your units cost more gold in the mid game. And on a map like Arabia, where there's a lot of fighting, that's almost an eco bonus. Organ guns, I think, are still very strong. You have good units. It's kind of like Chinese now, right? Except, Chinese are saving unit cost upgrades. Portuguese are saving, upgrades on the units themselves, right? So, I think that if you're making a lot of units, that's a bit better. You also got to remember, right? In today's meta now, with more rushing of infantry in the opening, cheaper infantry cost, that cheaper gold cost, I think is really good. So this is a civ that can play the openings, play a strong men-at-arms opening now. I think I have a build order somewhere, even before the cheaper infantry, of doing 20 pop Portuguese men-at-arms. Just things synergize so well. Decent light cav, good. I mean, this is a civ that there's not a ton of weaknesses here. It is a civ, which, hey, for me, that's an S tier civ, no doubt about it. Romans, again, another example to me of a civ that is probably S tier for higher level players, but I think A tier. Not having the strongest archers in the mid game, but your economy is so good, your infantry is so good. And cheap scorpions. You combine all those things together, right? It overcomes a lot of weaknesses in my book. Saracens. Saracens to me are a civ, nice B tier. You are out. You want to play scouts or archers usually. Don't really get as many opportunities to do that. At least with the scouts. You end up playing archers a bit more. That's not bad for you as Saracens because you still get a bonus for it. And I think it does play well into maybe even trying to use the market to get to Castle Age faster. But But you can find yourself under such pressure, it's actually kind of hard to do that if you're up against, say, like men-at-arms and archers. So, or men-at-arms and skirmishers. You just want it playing really defensively at that point. So, yeah, I think B tier is solid for them. But you've got a lot of diversity late, right? Great camels. Really great cav archers. People forget. So, Saracen cav archers fully upgraded. Pretty nice unit. Sicilians, one of my personal favorites. I think it's a C tier civ though. Not quite D tier. I think I've said it before. I think Sicilians are the most misunderstood civilization in the game. Not taking as much bonus damage. I see Sicilians as a civ. If you have the hunt with this civ, you can probably use their new bonus to get like an 18 pop uptime with them, and that's good. But this is a civ that I think normally you gotta really love playing scouts and like love playing skirmishers. That's your feudal age comp. Sergeants now are, I think, unplayable early except for, really situational moments. And yeah, man, it's I think Sicilians are a civ that they probably got nerfed more than they got buffed in the last patch. Just because Chicken Arabia now, I think, normally means for mid-elo players, probably not getting all the uptimes. So yeah, it's decent. It's a civ that has some options. If you want to play shot cavalry knights and all that, really good. But getting there can be a problem. Slavs to me are a nice A tier civ. I think you have enough missing at the archery range to not get them S tier, but really nice food bonus. I think your infantry rush is super strong now with them. Free arson is insane. I think men-at-arms skirmisher is going to be really strong with the civ. This is a civ that I think that players are going to figure out how strong the like men-at-arms skirmisher forward is, and when players figure that out, I think it's going to be really, really hard to stop. Spanish to me, I'll put them in the C tier as well. A lot of flexibility, especially as you go onward into the game. But too generic as an opening. You miss crossbow. I think there's enough limitations there to where I just don't feel comfortable with Spanish any higher than that. Probably B tier when you get in the Imperial Age, maybe. Not a lot of... Your eco bonus is weird for them. I actually think you can get a lot of extra gold for the Spanish. But for some reason, it's hard to kind of operationalize that. You take a civ like Malians that gets, I think, a comparable gold bonus, but the Malians are also getting a wood bonus, and the Spanish really aren't. So, Spanish are kind of the odd man out. I think, speaking of odd men out, Tatters, again, usually you want to try and play scouts in the CA. You'll deal with men-at-arms more. You can open men-at-arms yourself. It's not bad. Scouts and archers is a decent opening, and then even just opening archers with Tatters, pretty good. But you end up having to play a little bit differently. Let me actually put them in the B tier, though. I think that you have enough unit diversity at the later stages of games. With Step Lancers, Free Thumb Ring is so helpful. You can get the Cav Archers with the Civ in ways that other ones can't. I mean, this is a Civ to me that really parallels to the Huns, except I think you have more unit diversity. I actually like Tatters better than Huns in a lot of circumstances. So for that reason, we'll go ahead and, yeah, I think they're worth being in the B tier. Looking at the Teutons on Arabia, I think also B tier. Again, I think your archery range is a little bit of struggle. Decent eco to save some wood. That can be really helpful when you're making archers. I think men-at-arm tower play is probably decent with them now, but you still, it takes so much of your economy to devote to that's basically just not working. That can be a real struggle. I think when it comes, I think part of the reason tower play you don't see it as much is that probably of all of the strategies, the defender's advantage is strongest with tower defense. But, once you get to the mid game, I mean, you're still the same Teutons as you basically were at other points. So, Teutonic Knight, it's a nice healthy unit these days, but, I think it's got, like a little more HP or something like that now. Maybe the elite version does. It's a good civ, right? More options than you'd think. Hand Cannoneers are nice from the range. A lot of map control. The Teutons are a civ that they want to play their really slow-paced style of game, and when they do that, they're great. Turks to me, C tier. To me, the question all about the Turks is that can you make this a game about light cav early? If it becomes a game about countering archers and having to go skirmishers, I think you wind up losing because you don't get elite skirm, and you don't get pikemen to deal with mobile units if your opponent wants to go into those. I think it's all about if you make the game more of a mobile light cav game, which can be good versus civs that want to go archers, but civs might not go archers against you. They might be going men-at-arms, and now it kind of makes you need to go archers. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think the meta really is not the best for Turks, but you do have some decent options late. Great cav archers, nice gunpowder, fully upgraded cavaliers are good. You can play knight crossbow in the mid game with a civ like this in a way that, you know, maybe some other civs like Franks that miss thumb ring kind of struggle with, right? You know, Sicilians miss thumb ring can kind of struggle with that. You get a nice gold bonus to help you out with that too. So double gold compositions with Turks I think is a really nice bet in the mid game for mid-elo players. Vietnamese, look, I think that Vietnamese are, to me, they are easily an A tier civ, almost S tier. In fact, look, I know the word on the street about Vietnamese. I've looked at their rankings over the years. I was going to do a video about this. I still might, if this trend holds up in this patch. I don't know why Vietnamese are so bad on Arabia historically. This is a civ that has great archers, great cav archers, good cavalry, nice elephants. You know where your opponent's TC is at the start of the game. No mystery. Potentially infinite gold with paper money. You know, infantry that don't have the attack but got the armor. I mean, you know, bombard cannons, etc. This is a good civ. It doesn't miss much. I don't care what the win rate is on Arabia. It's an A tier civ. I don't know why folks haven't figured this civ out. I play them. I have a good time. It's fine. But, you know, hey, you know, other people got to do their thing. And finally, we have the Vikings. Vikings, I think, are in a great place right now. And I gotta say, I see this as an A tier civ. You know, I didn't think I'd have more A tier civs than B tier civs, but that's the world we're living in, folks. Really good economy, play great in the archers, play great in the men-at-arms. Really nice early imp power spike. Late game, that's where you struggle. Vikings are on a timer. You want to kill early and build up enough of an advantage to where you're going to be able to do that and opponent can't come back. But overall, though, I think that, you know, Viking early and mid game, there's enough points in the game where you're ahead economically to where I just think it helps Vikings immensely. And that's a big part of their success. The economy really is that strong. And that's the tier list, folks. You can see not a lot of D tier civs. Even the A tier, or rather the S tier and the C tier, not a ton of civs at the top, not a ton of civs at the bottom. It really is kind of concentrated in the middle. And I think in today's meta, there's so many strats now. Again, more A tier civs than B tier civs. I'll stand by that. I'll stand by every civ in that A tier list. You know, there's a lot of great civs out there today. Anyways, that's the tier list. I know we've gone over a lot of time, almost an hour. I'm not going to let this thing go an hour. You know, let me know what you think about the new patch. How's it going for you? What kind of tendencies are you seeing? That's something that if you've made it this part of the video, I'm going to try and do a video soon about what I think is changing in the meta and what I'm seeing in gameplay at the mid-elo level. Talked a little bit about that, but I might want to make a whole video about it. That being said, folks, hope you enjoyed this tier list. And that being said, I'm Jim James 59, and I'll see you out there in the ladder. Peace.